Hi. So today I want to talk about anxiety. And the reason why I want to talk about anxiety, and this live is titled Overcoming Anxiety, is for the only reason that during my sessions with my clients, I'm realizing more and more people are actually suffering from anxiety. They're actually being overtaken by anxiety. And as well, the month of May is actually Mental Health Awareness Month. So I think that anxiety is really an interesting subject to talk about. And in this live, I will actually give you tips and tools on how to manage better anxiety, on how to respond to anxiety and not react to anxiety. But first of all, to be able to understand how to respond to anxiety, we need to understand what is anxiety, and is anxiety normal or abnormal? Is it a normal emotion or is it an abnormal emotion? And not everybody feels anxiety or anxious. And if you see here, I said feel anxious. One tip that I would give you is not to say I am stressed or I am anxious, because when you use that terminology, the brain is listening to you and the brain is actually going to do what you're telling it to do. So when I say I am stressed, I am anxious, I'm actually identifying, and then I will personify that emotion. So when I say I feel, it's a feeling, and feelings go and they come and they go, they don't stay. So there's no personalization or identification to that emotion, to that feeling. So I would advise you to say, I feel anxious, not I am anxious. For me today, anxiety, and for a lot of people, I think that anxiety is really a pandemic or an epidemic, because I realize that more and more people are feeling anxious. There are different reasons why people are feeling anxious. There are different factors for people to feel anxious. Now, I just want to mention that if you have any questions to ask or anything, I will leave like 10 minutes at the end of the live where you can ask the questions you want, and I'll try to answer as best as I can. So what is actually anxiety? Well, anxiety is an emotion, and emotions are not good or they're not bad. I have spoken previously that emotions are actually energy in motion, right? And if we don't allow this energy to take its motion, then it will come and it will stick somewhere in our body. And this is where we talk about the psychosomatic. Now, if you would want to know more about all of this, I do have a live which is called Rise in Self-Love. So anxiety is actually an emotion, and in this emotion actually is warning us that there is something in our environment that is actually dangerous. Anxiety has a role. So again, it's not good, it's not bad, it has a role. And I would advise you to befriend your emotions. So maybe you could just sit and wonder, what is anxiety trying to warn me about? What is it trying to tell me? Usually what comes with anxiety is worry. It's nervousness, and it's related to the future. So maybe there's something in the future, something in your environment that is causing this anxiety to come up, to show up. So what is important is to be able to identify where is this stressor coming from, right? The difference between stress and the difference between anxiety is that stress comes and goes, and we know the trigger, we can see the trigger, whereas anxiety, we're not able to identify the trigger, and it makes us feel nervous. So an example that I usually give is like a gazelle. When the gazelle is in the savannah and she's eating the herbs and everything, right? And she sees the lion or she smells the lion, anxiety kicks in, she feels stress, and she starts running to run away from this lion. So it's actually warning her, be careful, there's something dangerous in the environment. Now, once the gazelle has been able to outrun the lion, she will calm down and she will start regulating her body. So these are the different nervous systems that we all have in our body, right? So she'll start to regulate herself. But if the gazelle, after the lion wasn't able to catch her, is still there and worrying and looking right, left, and center, where's the lion? Where's the lion? Where's the lion? Or I'm anxious, or I'm feeling anxious, that is actually anxiety. And so you see that she responded positively to stress when she regulated. Once the stress is over, she's fine. But always worrying, always wondering, always being scared, this is where you actually feel that anxiety is overtaking. Now, we need to learn how to respond to our emotions. We have three brains. Our first brain is the mind. The second one is our stomach, where we have 90% of the happy hormone, serotonin, that is produced there. And this is why it is very important for you to have a healthy gut. And your third brain is your heart, if we want to call it the emotions, right? And it's important that they're all linked together. Now, what happens with the brain? Most of the time, your brain is on autopilot. The subconscious mind is the one that controls us most of the time. And to be able to learn how to respond and not react to anxiety, we need to be more aware, more conscious of what is going on and not being on autopilot. How do we do that? Well, we can practice mindfulness. We can be more aware of what are the triggers. We could do, like, for example, a little exercise when we are starting to feel anxious, we wonder, what is it that anxiety, what is the message that anxiety is trying to tell me? What is it warning me about the situation? And then learning how your body responds. Each of us, our body responds differently to different emotions. Some people, for example, when they're feeling anxious, they start sweating, they start trembling. Other people have cramps in their stomach. Now, you need to know one thing, that anxiety is good sometimes, because when we feel anxious, like, for example, singers, when they want to go and perform, they feel anxious a bit. And that anxiety actually helps them to perform better. People who do public speaking, even if they have done millions and millions of times they have they have spoken public, they still do get anxious, because that anxiety or that stress is actually motivating them, and that anxiety is actually making sure that they do they say the speech properly. But when it becomes let's say unhealthy, this is when, for example, during an exam, you will start having those moments of blackouts, or those moments of you won't remember, though you have studied a lot for the exam, or you have studied a lot for the presentation and prepared everything, but you just have what we call in French trou de mémoire. It's like your memory, you forget, you're not able to retrieve anymore the information. And this is because anxiety has overtaken you, because there's something that you're fearful of. So one tip would be, start to breathe, just breathing, deep breathing. Sometimes people will tell me, okay, how much do I count on the inhale? How much do I count on the exhale? Whatever makes you feel comfortable. And an advice that I will give you is to put one hand on your stomach and one hand on your chest, and to make sure that your stomach is going up. So it's like when we inhale, imagine you have a balloon, and that balloon is being filled with the air, right? And the chest is not moving. So we inhale, keep it in. And we exhale. Now you'll see that I exhale through my mouth. Some people prefer exhaling through their nose. The reason why I exhale through my mouth is because I can exhale slower. It's important that your exhale is longer than the inhale, because when the exhale is longer than the inhale, you're making sure that you're emptying your lungs. And if you just want to do it again one more time with me, just go ahead, just inhale. And exhale. And tune in into your body and see how your body is reacting. So I don't know if you realized a bit, but my voice even calmed down compared to the beginning. Why? Because I have calmed down my nervous system. Sadly, we have the fight and flight, which not really sadly, it's triggered every day more and more in today's society. Every minute, our fight and flight is triggered. The fight and flight is here for our survival. Again, the brain, the only mission of the brain is to keep you alive. It doesn't care about anything else. It's just keeping you alive. It doesn't care if you're feeling anxious. It doesn't care if you're feeling stressed. It doesn't care if you're happy or if you're sad. We will go into understanding better the happy hormones and the reason why we always need more. But right now, the brain really doesn't care. It only cares about your survival. That's why the brain was created, to keep you alive. Okay, and this is why we have what we call the fight and flight and freeze. What is the fight and flight and freeze? Which we will call the sympathetic nervous system. It's responsible for, in case of danger, to make you run or to make you fight. And sometimes it can make you freeze. So let's imagine a car is coming, you're crossing the road, right? If you jump on the car, this is the fight. If you run, this is the flight. And if you freeze, this is the freeze, right? And the thing is, today, with everything around us in society, our nervous system is constantly being triggered. Our vagus nerve is constantly being triggered. And this is why we see a rise in anxiety. This is why we're seeing a rise in panic attacks, because our nervous system is constantly triggered. So what do we need to do? We need to make sure that it's only triggered when it's really, really a matter of there is something dangerous. One thing is, try to avoid the alarm in the morning, because the way that you're waking up, you're already waking up jumping. Your nervous system, you know, the fight and flight is already triggered. So you start your day like that. And some people will tell me, yeah, but I can't wake up without the alarm. You can, you just need to train your internal clock to wake up, you know, without the alarm. So like that, you wake up calmly, and you will realize most of the time, maybe you're waking up before the alarm. And it's important that as soon as you wake up, it's okay, just get out of bed. Even though if you're a bit tired, we'll trick the brain and say, I'm doing okay, but I'll just sleep earlier today. So you don't really feel that you're tired and you don't go through that programming. It's very important that you respect and that you have a clean sleep hygiene. Our sleep is very important because it helps us regulate our body, it helps the brain to relax, and it helps the body to heal whatever it needs to heal. So a very important and the crucial advice that I would give you is try not to wake up with your alarm in the morning, and try to bring in some breathing exercise. The snooze button as well is your worst enemy. I know that a lot of us, we love to press on that snooze button and we say 5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes. But the problem with the snooze is that, first of all, the alarm has already triggered the fight and flight. And then when you snooze, you're going back into another sleep cycle, but you're not continuing the sleep cycle. And that's why you're feeling so tired. And again, you're triggering the fight and flight once more with that alarm, you know. So try to avoid the snooze. If you feel that you're feeling very anxious lately, try as well to avoid stimulants. Try to avoid coffee, try to avoid sugar, try to avoid alcohol. All of these are stimulant. All of these do not help your fight and flight response. We want our parasympathetic nervous system to come in and to kick in to self-regulate. That is the system that is responsible for us to self-regulate. So like the gazelle, when she's self-regulating, that's the system that comes forward. And we want to bring the system as much as possible forward, so it becomes kind of automatic. We're no longer on that autopilot, you know. And how do we practice that? By being mindful, by being aware. When we are mindful, when we are aware, we are more in control, if you want, of your surroundings, because you're able to perceive better what is going on around you. when I am able to identify a stressor or identify a certain threat, I am able to deal with it better than when I am not aware of it and I allow my emotions to overcome. So here I'm learning how to respond to situation and not react to situation. Most of us, we react most of the time. We don't respond. And this is as well where EQ comes in. When I have the ability to understand and manage my emotions and understand the emotions of others, this is where I hire my EQ. Sadly, we haven't been taught enough how to feed our EQ or how to improve our EQ. The world today, again, is very much academic oriented and not emotionally oriented. More and more studies are showing how important emotional intelligence is. So one way of practicing EQ is to learn how to manage your emotion. When we manage our emotions, we are in the response. We are not in the reactive mode. Even in conversations, when we're talking to someone, be aware of what are we listening. Most of us don't listen. Most of us are just there. We want to respond straight away. We feel attacked, but we're not listening to what the other person is saying. One tip that I would give you if you're talking to someone and you see their body language kind of changing is asking them, what have you heard me say? And you will realize that most of the time that person did not hear you properly. They assumed something. So going back to the response and the reactive, why is it important to respond most of the time? Because when we respond most of the time, we're not triggering our fight and flight or freeze response. We're not triggering our vagus nerve. When we don't trigger the vagus nerve constantly, the feeling of anxiety goes down. We learn that through when we want to calm down the vagus nerve, or when we're calming down the vagus nerve, this is where we regulate our emotions. When we regulate our emotions, we are responding. Remember, 90% of the time, we are on autopilot, meaning 90% of the time, the way we react to situation is autopilot because of the past. So bring yourself back to the now, to the moment. What is going on? What is around me? And then ask yourself, what can I control? What can I really control? Can I control the situation of the country? Can I control how other people behave or what other people might think? I can't control that. And worrying and wondering and over ruminating does not help. What I can control is my behavior, is my thoughts. When I am able to control my thoughts, to control my behavior, I am able to respond to the emotions. I am able to be more mindful of my emotions, right? So if I become more aware of what I can control, this is where I'll have a sense that there's no real threat unless really there's a physical threat around me. By responding to the world around us, we are more in control, we are more relaxed, and we are not triggering our nervous system. The reason why I emphasize a lot on the control is because you can control your thoughts. One of the worst things that we tend to do, especially when we're very anxious, is to ruminate. You know, usually what we will say is people who are depressed are stuck in the past, and people who feel anxious are stuck in the future. But a lot of times as well, we're worrying about the future. We start imagining worst case scenarios. We're not even sure that this scenario is going to happen. And yet we worry constantly about it because we don't feel we have control. So a tip that I would give you is ask yourself, how can I feel in control? What can I do to be in control? What can I control and what can't I control? And as you realize, you can control your thoughts. So I can stop my thoughts. Now, if you feel that your thoughts are really too much, another tip will be to distract yourself. Go out for a walk. Walk outside. Walking outside with the sun is amazing. We need the sun. And I believe that everybody should walk outside, and not just me, most of us, you know, in the mental and medical field. it's so important for you to walk and to be outside in the sun, because the sun gives you a lot of benefit. It gives you vitamin D. A lot of times when I have someone who starts with me, my first question is, when did you do your last blood test, sorry. And the reason why I ask this is because I want to see if the vitamins B and vitamins D are okay. Because if your vitamin D is not right, then you will feel low, then you will feel anxious, then you will feel down, and it kinds of mimic the depression and the feeling low and feeling anxious, where actually you're just missing vitamin D, which you're missing the sun. Going out under the sun actually helps you to have a better sleep. Having a proper sleep hygiene, as I said earlier, is important, and especially if you feel you're very anxious. Why? Because you allow the body to calm down, you allow the mind to calm down. A lot of time when we feel anxious, it's during that moment before going to bed that we start thinking, and we start ruminating, and we start thinking about the whole day or worrying about the second day and everything. And what actually happens is that we are triggering our nervous system. We're getting angry, we're getting frustrated because we're not falling asleep, right? So then we end up staying awake for most of the night, and the second day we're cranky and we're irritable and we don't feel good. One advice I would give you, don't get mad because you're not sleeping. Just say, you know what? It's okay. If I don't sleep tonight, I'll just sleep earlier tomorrow. And you will see most of the time, the moment you say that sentence, you just fall asleep. Another thing would be get out of bed. Remember, the bed is just a place to sleep. It's not a place to watch Netflix. It's not a place to watch movies or YouTube or eat or even be on your laptop or even be on your phone. Okay. The bed is just meant to sleep. And if you have difficulties sleeping properly, then you need to reprogram your brain to understand that the bed is just for sleeping. So if you're not sleeping within 15 minutes, just get out of the bed and go and sit in the living room, grab a book, read a book. Don't use your phone. The reason why I tell you don't use your phone is because of the screens. The screens actually wake you up. Another advice for anxiety, if you ever feel anxious, be careful to what you listen and to what you watch. Sometimes the news can trigger you. Sometimes movies can trigger you. And it's important to have this holistic approach when it is in our habits, what it is when what we hear, what we read, what we watch, and what we're eating. It's having that balance in all of it to help us overcome this anxious feeling. When people feel or have panic attacks, we call it the fear of the fear. It's because you're scared to trigger it, and this is why you trigger it. But sometimes the brain has associated the bodily symptoms with the panic attack. So as a first start, when you're feeling anxious, a good exercise is ask yourself, how is my body reacting to this emotion? If it's rapid heartbeat or shallow breath, then try to avoid any activity that will actually trigger that for the time being until you learn how to deal with the panic attacks to not trigger them anymore. One thing sometimes I would tell my clients is to avoid cardio, because sometimes when the heart starts beating fast, they might think, oh my God, I'm starting to feel anxious, I'm triggering a panic attack. Well, actually, no, it's because they're running, and it's because it's normal. The heart is just pumping. One exercise that we can do together is, I would just like you, whenever you want, just run, maybe in the same place, or just go for a jog, right? And then just put your hand on your heart and just feel the heartbeat, and just feel how the heartbeat will calm down by itself. These are exercises I love doing with kids, and just see and just tune in on how your heartbeat is actually calming down. So whenever you're feeling anxious, then you just need to put your hand there and take a couple of breaths, and you realize that your heartbeat is going to calm down. And so like that, the mind doesn't start wandering and going further. It comes back into the moment. Touching ourselves as well secretes or helps secretes the happy hormone that we have, which is the acronym that we use, which is DOSE. So the dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and epinephrine. So dopamine is the happy hormone, knowing that the happy hormone is a little cookie monster that always wants more. So sometimes because we want more and we're not getting it, this is why we're feeling anxious. When we learn to respond to situations, when we learn to be in the now, when we learn to be more aware, then we don't need as much dopamine or happy hormones. And then another thing would be, what is happiness? A lot of people confuse happiness with pleasure. They think, or for them, happiness is actually buying the latest phone or getting what they want or, going on a trip, but that's not really happiness. Happiness really is being okay with the good and the bad and knowing that this too shall pass. That this too shall pass is not just for the bad moments, it's as well for the happy moments. This is how life is. Life is made of seasons. And when we understand that it's made of seasons and we're able to say, okay, this is going to pass, this is not going to stay the way it is. This is how anxiety as well, loses its power in a way, because I know that it's just a feeling. Again, emotions are energy in motion. They're temporary and they're very powerful. So if you just sit back and you observe the emotion is going to go. So knowing that life is seasons, knowing that emotions are seasons, and knowing that this situation is not going to stay like this forever, this already calms us down and tells us, okay. And then we can just sit there and say, okay, now what can I do? What do I need to be aware of? What do I need to change for the situation to change? Because it is in our control. Do I need to reframe, for example? If I don't like my job, or I don't like my boss, but I really need this job, or I just can't let it go due to certain situations, then I need to reframe. And something that works is using intrinsic motivation when we want to do something, which is different than external motivation. Whenever you have intrinsic motivation, it actually helps you to conquer or to move forward or to accomplish something, and it helps you during the hard moments. So let's say, for example, you decided to change careers at an older age and you had to go back to university to become, I don't know, an engineer or doing what your life purpose was, right? You're not always going to have happy moments. The goal is to do that life purpose, but you're not always going to have happy moments. So, and then sometimes you might feel anxious and you might say, oh, how am I going to do it? This is never ending. How am I going to succeed? And then just monitor how you're talking to yourself. But if your motivation to do your life purpose is intrinsic, no matter what comes your way, you will be able to actually accomplish what you have put, and it will be easier for you to overcome those negative moments or those heavy moments. Yeah. So one way to really learn how to manage better your emotions and anxiety especially is to tune into your emotional intelligence, to tune into yourself and to be like, okay, what's going on? What's really going on? What am I really worried about? And when you're observing your thoughts, ask yourself, is this thought rational or is it irrational? If it's rational, what can I do about it? So you're actually challenging the thoughts. If it's irrational, so it's irrational. I can let go of that thought, and anxiety would just dissolve, with it. Again, anxiety is not something bad. We do need anxiety. On the contrary, it's like fear, anxiety, fear is part of anxiety. And fear is important because we need to have a certain level of fear. If I am in the jungle and there's a lion running after me and I'm not scared, well, I'm done. So fear is good. So we need to just sit there with our emotions and ask ourselves, What are you trying to tell me? Befriend your emotions. Don't fight them. The more you fight them, the more you resist, the more they're going to come. Freud used to say something, the more you resist your emotions and the more you might ignore them or push them away, they're just going to come uglier later on. So just sit with it and ask, what are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to warn me about? What do I need to do to feel better? You know, sometimes it might be an irrational thought, especially when we have a tendency to always have the worst case scenario, you know, thinking the worst case scenario. Do you know what's going to happen? Are you sure this is going to happen? And what if this happens? What can you do? You know? And it's always about bringing ourselves in the moment. Being mindful is just such a beautiful thing, and we really need to learn from kids, because kids actually they're kings of mindfulness. I don't know if you remember how your school year was, right? During our school year, we used to feel it was so long, and today we're just rushing through life. We're not taking a moment. We're not breathing. We're not pausing. And it's always on the go, and we're always triggering our response, always triggering it. I wake up in the morning, I have the alarm. And then after that, I'm going to put maybe the news. And again, I'm going to feel and I'm going to hear things and I'm going to get worried and I'm re-triggering it. And then I get in the car. And then when I'm in the car, I'm going to work or whatever it is. There's the traffic jam. There are the sirens or people who are honking. Or if I'm going walking, you know, somebody who's passing by with the scooter or with the bicycle, or even a car that's going to honk, and I just jump, and it's constantly jumping and jumping and jumping. And this is why we are not able to control anymore our anxiety, and we feel overwhelmed by all of these emotions. Another tip that I would give you, if you ever feel extremely anxious, we have an old reflex within us. It's called the diving reflex. And maybe you have already seen this on TikTok or Instagram, somebody speaking about it. And it's just like, it's very easy. Just go turn on the tap, fill up, you know, the how do we call it? The whatever, where you clean your hands, right? Fill it up with water and just dip your head inside. Just dip your head or just splash water on your face, and you'll see that automatically you'll snap out. Why are we snapping out? Because we're snapping out of our thoughts. When we snap out of our thoughts, we're able to control better. When our body is reacting, we learn to calm our body down. Our body is warning us as well. Be careful, something is going on. You need to pay attention to something in your environment. Yeah. So when we're more aware of what's going on in the environment, when we're more aware of how our body is reacting, then we learn to respond. If I'm having palpitations, what's going on? Is it a thought? Is it something in my environment? If I am perceiving a real stressor, what do I need to do? How do I deal with this stressor? Is it going to pass, or do I need to do something? You know, sometimes we have to do a physical movement or something like that to remove ourselves from the situation. Another thing as well is being aware of the people that we surround ourselves with. If we have, emotions are contagious. And I know this is going a bit more towards emotion, but because anxiety is like the prime one, but emotions are contagious. Maybe you realize sometimes you will be sitting next to someone who is anxious, feeling anxious, and you're going to start feeling anxious. And here it's where you need to learn as well to be able to respond and not take on the other person's emotion. So when we want to talk about anxiety, the origin of anxiety is internal. You see, I said a lot about how your body is responding or reacting to it. Stress is external. The duration of anxiety is long-term. So this is how we know that we're feeling anxious, because stress, usually it's very short-term. And again, the triggers, it's not easy to identify the triggers. So this is why it would be good to sit with yourself and ask yourself, what is it? Again, is it a thought? Is it a situation? Is it a person? And then go on to the next questioning. So let's say, for example, it's a situation. What do I think about this situation? What is worrying me in this situation? Why am I feeling nervous towards the situation? What is in my control, you know? And you'll see that when you start breaking down, this situation doesn't seem as big anymore. And when we want to deal with something, it's always good to break it down. Even when you're having a problem or something like that, break it down. What is the first step that you can do? And this is how you become into the response. If we can just learn to respond to everything in our lives and not to react, then everybody would be healthy mentally. None of us will have all these emotions that are actually controlling us and overtaking us. So the basic emotions of anxiety is actually fear and worry. Again, fear is good. Worrying sometimes is good. But when it's overtaking us, this is where it becomes problematic. So we need to have that under control. The distress that it causes is severe. This is where, you know, if we're too exposed, we go into general anxiety disorder, and it's generally diffused everywhere. This is why it's so hard to be able to recognize where is it coming from, because then it kind of stains every aspects of our lives. And this is where the difficulty in identifying, but when we're able to sit down, when we're able to observe and identify, then we can reframe. And by reframing, we are able to have a different attitude. And it's as well the attitude that we have that is very important towards anxiety. If I have an attitude of, I hate you, I want you away, I'm going to push you, I'm going to fight you, I'm going to resist you, it's just going to come and bite us back, you know. It's like someone who needs to give you a message and you don't want to listen, they're going to bang down the door and they're going to make you listen to that message if it's really important. So instead of resisting and fighting it, maybe it's just like sitting down with it. I'm not telling you to become its best friend and to, you know, love it and identify and become it, but befriend it. Sit down, listen to it. Okay, what's your message? What are you trying to make me, you know, be aware of? And then, you know, you'll see it will just go because you paid attention. Again, emotions are here for a reason. They're here to make you pay attention to something. This is why we have emotions. So common symptoms in anxiety is like restlessness. We feel restless. That's why we don't sleep properly. That's why we're constantly agitated and we need to move. We feel nervous. There's a feeling of unease. And usually when we feel anxious, when we have all these emotions and we're not allowing the emotion to take, you know, this energy to take its motion, it creates something that we call dis-ease. And this is where the word disease comes from, the psychosomatic. Our body will actually start bringing out because we are not paying attention to what the mind or what the emotions are trying to tell us. So it's kind of like really important to learn how to be in the now and how to be in the moment and how to respond and not react, in order for us to befriend our anxiety, in order for us to have better control over our anxiety, and to really listen, basically, really listen to what it has to tell us.